to the day that I drop, you'll never say that I'm...
Unlikely as it sounds, I want to talk to you today about video games, or computer games, or whatever it is that the young people call them nowadays. Now, I know, as well as you do, that what I know about video games would not fill the back of a small postage stamp. I'm very ignorant about them. I haven't played them, I'm not interested in them, I don't want to play them or get interested in them, I don't have the time in my life. But the other day I was walking through Leicester Square, I was at a movie premiere, and I came out and there was, in the middle of Leicester Square, a Jeep with, like, you know, guys dressed as soldiers and cameras and photographers everywhere. And it looked like it was a movie premiere for some new war movie, but it wasn't. It was to celebrate the launch of a video game, of the new Call of Duty video game, about which I know very little, except what I've read, and I'm sure you have, in the press. Two things everyone's saying about it. One is, it's going to be huge, make a lot of money. The other is, people have been saying, oh, it's terribly violent, it's going to be very damaging, very bad, terribly violent, or it's going to corrupt the nation's youth. Now, it's very important to get some kind of perspective on this, because, as you may know, I am somebody who is generally held up as being the person who hates video games. In fact, Charlie Brooker has made a couple of programs in which he's used a clip of me on Newsnight Review saying, you know, I'm not interested in video games, I don't like them, I'm no fan of them, I don't want to play them. Now, that clip's turned up a couple of times. Fair enough, I said it and I meant it. I'm not interested in video games. But it's very important to distinguish between not being interested in something and thinking that something is bad. Funnily enough, what's happening with video games, about which I know nothing, reminds me very much of the moral panic that surrounded the video nasties back in the 1980s. Now, here's what I remember about the video nasties panic. If you were a horror film fan who understood horror movies, who understand the films of Lucio Fulci or Dario Argento, if you knew the conventions, there was never any sense at all that these video nasties, so-called video nasties, were going to do anybody any harm. The people who thought they were going to do harm were people who knew nothing about horror movies. They were juries who were shown a copy of Driller Killer at 9 o'clock in the morning and asked whether or not they thought it was depraving and corrupting. They were so shocked by the fact that it was a horror film, because they hadn't seen a horror film in years, they went, oh yes, of course, it's terrible and evil. Now, some people have said to me, you know, Mark, you should play Call of Duty, because that way you'd be able to form an opinion about whether or not it's actually good or bad for you. No. I shouldn't play it because I know nothing about video games. I don't understand the language, the convention. I don't know how people play video games. But what I do know is this. When it comes to this kind of argument, I respect the people who seem to have done their research. Now, there's a piece in the paper today by Charlie Brooker talking about the new Call of Duty. And he says that there are some things about it that he finds are a lapse into poor taste. But he uses the phrase, don't worry, it's not going to turn anyone into killers. And on the other hand, there are MPs standing up who I don't think have actually played video games, standing up saying, oh, it's going to corrupt our nation's youth. They're a terrible thing. We have to clamp down on video games. Well, here's my position on this. Charlie Brooker may have used me as an example of somebody who's on the anti-camp with video games. Completely untrue. I respect Charlie Brooker's opinion. I think that he is right about video games in the way that we were all right about video nasties. And if I'm going to take some kind of steer about something about which I know nothing, who am I going to trust? Keith Vaz or Charlie Brooker, who actually seems to know and love video games? He may not be a fan of mine, but I'm a big fan of Charlie Brooker.